Hi, I'm Sydney, and today we're going to talk about Lady Macbeth's out scene, comparing two versions, the Kate Fleetwood version from the movie version of Macbeth, and the Judi Dench version from a stage production. So really, there are a couple main key elements in all of this that I'm going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the lighting, the interaction with the environment, the interpretation of the Shakespearean writing, and this will all lead us to our conclusion of light versus dark as Lady Macbeth succumbs to her madness. First, let's start with lighting. In the Judi Dench version, she's completely shrouded in darkness. So for those of you who haven't seen it, she looks like this for most of this production. You can't see much of her at all, completely shrouded from the beginning in this darkness. But in this scene, even the background is black. All you can see is Judi Dench's face and the candle that she kind of waves her hand in front of. Later we focus back on two characters, but we never get any setting of the scene. In the Kate Fleetwood version, on the other hand, we see the entire background is well lit, except for when she emerges from the darkness and goes back into the darkness at the end of the scene. So really this conveys these two characters, the same character portrayed by the same person, in these two very different environments. So what is that telling us about light versus dark? So in the Judi Dench version, she has completely gone into darkness. She is lost. Hell is murky. And so the stage direction that the stage production uses is to just completely black out the audience. You are stuck with Lady Macbeth in this darkness and this madness that she is finally given into. However, in the Kate Fleetwood version, you see much more of the room, interestingly enough, that she and Lord Macbeth, or Thane Macbeth, were in quite earlier. So, one character interacts with the darkness and one of it is shrouded. So I think the film director is telling us that she's coming in and out of this darkness at this point, whereas in the Judi Dench stage production, there's much less question as to whether she is fully descended into darkness. Next, let's talk about the interaction with the environment. So as I said before, Judi Dench does not have a whole lot of environment to interact with. However, she does have this candle, which seems to be a light in the darkness, and it's what she's giving this speech to. Is she talking to her own inner sanity, possibly, in the situation of light versus dark? She knows what she did is wrong in the Thane of Fife had a wife, but can she ever reach back to that light that she barely brushes her hand over? And the answer at the end of the play is no. However, Kate Fleetwood has a lot more to interact with. We see her descend into the room that she and Macbeth were in earlier, and she pours bleach on her hands, trying to get as much of the blood that she thinks, the damn spot that she thinks is there, out. She also turns on the sink, and the sink runs blood. So I don't think Shakespeare had quite the same sinks as we do, but something tells me he would love this idea of the water she thought could previously cleanse her has now run completely into blood. So when we're interacting with these environments, it's showing somewhat that she's unaware of the other people around her. Kate Fleetwood's character only makes eye contact with another character when she asks for their hand, but she is not really asking for their hand, if you will, as she seems to be in a conversation sleepwalking with Macbeth. So this puts the other emphasis in the madness because they are trapped in their own minds. And the fact that Dench has little to no environment around her signifies that she has gone completely into darkness and so therefore cannot interact with the real world anymore. However, Kate Fleetwood's Lady Macbeth still has a chance to interact with the world, but probably not for the best. While Fleetwood interacts with the environment, she comes down an elevator. This elevator is shown a lot in the film version of Macbeth as Macbeth goes down the elevator to visit the witches, and he and Fleetwood are shown descending at the end of the movie. This elevator represents the line between the two worlds, the alive and well, and the supernatural. We don't really know in this film what it is, but the fact that Fleetwood has come down here in her sleep to me represents that she is taking an early descent into this madness. So, very little is actually omitted from this scene except for the very early parts with the Doctor and Lady Macbeth's maid. They talk about how she's sleepwalking and they kind of set up the scene, but the excerpts that we were able to watch in class actually show very little of that, emphasizing mainly Lady Macbeth's out speech. So Dinch, interestingly enough, leaves out the "give me your hand" line. So is she not offering, is her character, as she sees Lady Macbeth, not offering a hand to Macbeth? However, Fleet adds much more movement to this role than Dinch did. Dinch is paralyzed by this idea that she is forever fallen and descending into madness, whereas Fleetwood's character is able to move about, something that's not necessarily written into the script, but that she adds to the character. Very fussy, busy with the hands. A very interesting point that both characters do. In Shakespeare's script, when the character screams, it's simply "oh, oh, oh!" exclamation point. These characters both let out blood-curdling screams of different types. Judi Dench's is somewhat of a demon screech, starting from a light throaty noise more than deep, but is a dying scream and much less of a cry, whereas Fleetwood starts as an angry, sobbing, almost yelling out of anger. So both of these characters are approaching this light versus dark from a different place. Both actresses seem to interpret the source of this monologue very differently. Fleetwood approaches it as if she is talking to Macbeth. She is very distraught and very angry most of the time. Dinch, however, does not seem to act like another person is there or like she thinks she's interacting. It's much more of a monologue or an aside, something she's thinking to solely herself. And she's much more sad. It's not that she's angry with Macbeth for putting her in this situation that she put Macbeth in, much like Fleetwood's character, but that she simply is frustrated that she cannot get the damned spot out. The lighting, interaction with the environment, and interpretation of Shakespeare all show the internal struggles of this Lady Macbeth character and her struggle between the light and the dark. But as we know, she leaves the light very early on, and these decisions made by both the directors and the actors clearly show how flawed of a character she is, but also what a struggle she faces. She is the one who told Macbeth that water would simply wash it out, but here she could not get the damn spot out. She faces the same dilemma that Macbeth faces with his eye to hand. What his eyes can see, he does not want to see, he wants his hands to do, and vice versa. Lady Macbeth sees on her hand what is not really there, and her hand does what she wishes her eyes had not seen. Thanks for watching!